Welcome to Daniel chapter 11. It has to do with the kings of the north and of the south. 45 verses in a virtual tug-of-war between the king of the north and the king or kings of the south. Now, by the way, the king of the north is another name for Antichrist. He is considered the king from the north, and the king of the south is traditionally thought of as Egypt. This is a very detailed chapter, and it is estimated that there's 100 or more predictions made in it, which of course makes it very significant prophetically. But one of the things that we also need to note, and I only learned this recently, and that is, have you heard what is called the 400 silent years? The 400 silent years has to do with that period between the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, and the first book of the New Testament, Matthew. In between are 400 years that are called silent because there's no books of the Bible written and no prophetic activity. So we thought. But Chuck Missler made an interesting comment that actually Daniel 11 is primarily about the 400 silent years between Matthew and Malachi. But it's written in advance, written in the 6th century BC, not in the 2nd century. Because by then we already have the Septuagint and the book of Daniel was complete in that period. So 400 silent years, war between the king of the north and the king of the south. What is interesting is in history, after Alexander the Great died, he had his kingdom divided by 4 generals into 4 parts. One general was Ptolemy. He took Egypt. He was the king of the south. And the other was Seleucus. He was the king in Antioch in Syria. He was the king of the north. So when we talk about Antichrist, where is he from? Well, he's from the north. But north can mean Syria. North can mean Turkey. One of the keys to answering that question, one that we don't have any time to get into now, is the place names. If we can rightly interpret the place names, which at my understanding, all of them are in the Middle East, none of them in Europe, then we are at a better chance of identifying the king of the north, the Antichrist figure. Now, also of interest is a character who lived in the 2nd century before Christ, known as Antiochus IV or Antiochus Epiphanes. Epiphanes means God manifest. He was a prototype of the last days Antichrist. He ruled from Antioch in Syria. And to make a long story short, he lost a battle in Egypt to the king of the south. He comes back northward through the land of Israel and decides to take out his frustration on the Jewish people. Antiochus demanded that Sabbath keeping terminate, Torah or reading of the Old Testament stop. He took over the temple of God. He made it a shrine to himself, as well as sacrifice swine on the high altar of the temple, which is a grotesque sacrilege to Jewish people. His ungodly, blasphemous actions helped to spawn what we now know as the Maccabean Revolt, which eventually led to the cleansing of the temple, the liberation of Jerusalem, which is now the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, and then, of course, gave autonomy to the land of Israel. And so that's where the Hasmonean dynasty of 100 years took control. All of this was hinted at, or shall we say, forecast in Daniel 11. Let me read to you a couple of verses. Verse 41, talking about the king of the north, Antiochus as a prototype. He shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand. Even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. Let me go to verse 45. He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. This may be referring to his takeover of the holy place and perhaps even the most holy place in the Jerusalem temple. But listen to this. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. This sounds like Revelation chapter 19, where the beast and the false prophet are cast into a place known as the lake of fire. So this is an introduction to Daniel chapter 11, kings of the south and the north.